Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. And I am a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist, and I'm also the parent of an ADHD adult now. Was a child for a very long time, and that's how I got interested in ADHD at all. When we started out, ADHD had not even been, it was not a formal part of the diagnostic options you had for kids. And now we know that like 10% of everybody has ADHD, and we still are wrestling with exactly how to handle it. I don't know if anybody's a baseball fan, but I was watching the Little League. Well, they're qualifying to go to Cooperstown and play for the championship, I guess, of the world. I've been struck by how the coaches handled things when they didn't win, or when somebody really made a boo-boo and cost them the game, or when there were one or two questionable umpire calls, and how they talked about that. And I was impressed because it was all very controlled, shall we say. When I was playing in Little League, coaches yelled and screamed and jumped up and down and charged the umpire and all sorts of shenanigans that, well, didn't change a thing, but it just made it harder for the kids to perform well. Because you can't perform well when you're always worried about being criticized, yelled at, challenged, whatever, however you want to look at it. It just doesn't work well. And for some reason, we seem to be stuck in the need to punish. Now, I grew up a long time ago, okay? And most of the dads in my neighborhood had been in service during World War II. And the way the Army treats new recruits isn't really necessarily designed to get them to perform at their optimum best. I think it's more designed to train them to endure. Okay, and that's I suppose there's room for that, but I always wonder, about these super secret troops that put up with a humongous amount of punishment so they can do their job, or so they get qualified to do their job. And then I'm not sure how they react after that. But we're wandering away from the point, which is people try to use punishment with their ADHD children. And there are even some therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers out there in the world that are recommending what we used to call behavior modification, which behavior modification is simply you reward the behaviors you like and want to see, you punish the behaviors you don't like to see. The theory being that you punish them and they go away and you replace them with the new stuff. Doesn't work, okay? I used to say that's the way people train animals, but I have since run into a number of people who are professional animal trainers, mostly dogs, and their take on punishment is well, you can't control it. You don't know what kind of results you're going to get. And all it does really is temporarily suppress some kind of behavior, whatever it is you're yelling about, probably. So the idea is that punishment said, I know the parents worry because they're afraid Molly Collin, the kid, he'll grow up to be a juvenile delinquent. Honestly, juvenile delinquents are the ones that were punished and abused the most. And so behavior modification, or punishment in general, is not particularly effective, period. but especially for an ADHD kid. So remember, ADHD is not a behavior problem. Sometimes it looks like one, but it's not a behavior problem. It's a neurologic condition, and being a neurologic condition, you got to treat it a little differently. I'm not really recommending punishment anyway. I mean, I recognize that sometimes you have to set limits, but that's a whole different thing from humongous amounts of punishment, yelling, screaming, etc. Don't do that stuff, okay? It doesn't work. Matter of fact, we have solid evidence that it makes things worse, and you tend to have more explosive events because now the kid is terrified, and you start correcting him in your loud disciplinarian voice, and first they get upset, then they get scared, then they get angry, then they blow up. It doesn't work, and it's a shame to waste so much time. I mean, I don't know how many patients I have had, and now that I'm doing mostly coaching, it's clients who are just amazed that when they start being more aware of how they handle their ADHD kids and start working harder on being more positive, catching them being good, as we used to say, that their behavior improves. They come in, he's acting out, he's giant temper tantrums, da 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 da, and they're expecting I'm going to develop a new way to punish him. It's not what I do. And I don't do that because it doesn't work. And there are no ways to limit that, So many parents, after they start, as I said, paying more attention to themselves and how they handle things, how many critical comments per day, for instance, find that as they reduce the number of critical comments and try to be more positive, kids' behavior improves. Their ADHD actually acts better. What do you think? I mean, I have people, a lot of times I will say, if you carry a day timer or something like that, fine, use that. If you don't have, some kind of a notebook or a journal, something that you keep with you during the day, or shoot, if you can't do that, just get a stack of 3x5 cards. And every time you make a critical comment, count it. And, be honest about it, because this is really important for your child. And then for the first week or so, it's just count the critical ones. And sometimes people are really amazed. And then the next week, we want to count the critical ones and the positive comments. Keep track of those, 2 columns, 1 column critical, 1 column positive, and keep track of it that way. And you'll find, you'll have a pretty good idea of the quality of your interaction with your child. And, the other things you need to remember is your behavior is way more important than anything you say, okay, or any punishment you concoct, okay? Because they watch you, and you give them the cues for how they're supposed to behave. If you're ranting, raving, screaming, jumping up and down, they're going to think that's what adults do. And if you cheat on your income tax, they're going to try to cheat. So, and if you're telling them about the evils of substance abuse, but you're chain smoking and drinking 5 or 6 beers a day, they're not going to hear what you say. What you do is way more powerful. So you have a child who has a tendency to erupt. It is most likely because, and he has ADHD, of course, it is most likely that he's in a situation where he can't do it, or he's afraid he can't do whatever's being asked of him. You know, I don't want to do math homework. I don't know how to do math homework. I keep forgetting what I'm supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's a whole different thing than being disobedient. But if you jump on him about not doing his homework, I told you to do your, if you start that number, you're going to get some pushback. Your child's trying to preserve his ego. And did I say something that sounded like Freud? I'm sorry. I won't do that again. But the idea is that most of the time, your ADHD kiddo has a lot of troubles with the things we routinely ask of him or her during the day, especially in school. School is like specifically designed to torture ADHD kids. And I'm nothing against teachers. Well, my mother was a teacher for that matter. So I know being a teacher is not easy. But most teachers try hard. I'm not going to say that they don't. But you've got to know what you're dealing with. And unfortunately, unless they have ADHD in their own families, a lot of teachers have just never bothered to learn much about ADHD. They're the ones sending notes home. Put him on medication, which they've got no business doing, right? They should be talking about behaviors, and maybe medication is needed and maybe it isn't, but that is not their call. So enough of my rip on teachers, but sorry, Mom. So what are we going to do? But, schools are set up for compliant kids, people who can sit still for 4 or 5 hours, who will do whatever they're told, who don't have a problem staying focused. That's not your ADHD child. I'm sorry. Or not, I'm not really, because I think we need a whole bunch of ADHD kids growing up to be ADHD adults who are confident, resilient, and use their interesting way of looking at the world, their thinking outside the box and that sort of stuff, to solve the big problems we have in the world. So, punishment doesn't work. Pay attention to how often you criticize and cut back on it because it didn't do it any good. Encourage your kid. And when you see, or when you look back on situations where there have been outbursts, what was the issue? Because that will give you a clue as to what he's having trouble or she's having trouble with. Is it that their executive functioning is bad and it's interfering with their organization strategies? You've got to be familiar enough with the symptoms of ADHD that you can tease out what kind of issues they're having. And then you get to focus on that and try to help them through it. Okay? Positively. What are we going to learn from this? Okay, you had a horrible time with that project. What kind of difficulties did you have? What kind of problems? How can we make it better next time? They're not going to come up with the solutions. That's for you to do. But it's really important to not fall back on punishment. And don't think you're being less of a parent if you don't punish. You're being more of a parent. You're being more aware, more thoughtful, and you've thought it through. Okay, I guarantee you, if you look, the last time punishment worked for anything, there were a lot of consequences besides that, because that's what happens. Punishment suppresses behavior temporarily and then comes out somewhere else in some other way that's probably worse than the original thing you were concerned about. Okay, I am Dr. Terry James Gingras. This has been Dr. G's ADHD Chat. As I keep saying, this is a show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers, because we need them. We need these guys that think outside the box. They are the ones who solve the big problems that we have, the ones that conventional minds don't do very well with. Conventional thinkers keep the system going the way it is, but they don't make the big changes that improve things. So we need ADHDers for that. And leave me messages, ask me questions, suggestions for different topics to discuss, that sort of thing. And just a little heads up, sometime in the not too distant future, I'm going to be offering my course on strategic parenting, which covers a lot of what we've been talking about now, and probably would be helpful to you. It has helped a lot of my patients, so I'll talk more about that later. This is just a little heads up, okay? And we'll catch you next time then.